So hey guys, it's Zyant again, and I'm going to get right into the topic today because it's something that I think applies to any game with any sort of competitive mode. Be it competitive single player, competitive multiplayer, pretty much anything that forces players to get together in some form to compete against each other. I think co-op would also be a way to describe this. And the topic I want to talk about is the disparity between the truly skilled, one might even say professional players, and those players who are just pub stompers, is the term that's colloquially used to describe them today. This topic came about when I was watching a Team Fortress 2 spy frag video. And like most videos on YouTube, it had some comments on it. And one of the comments was rebuffed by the uploader, but apparently it was comparing this uploader to a former friend of mine, Stabby, probably one of the best TF2 spies out there, due in large part to his own skill, but also his 4,000 plus hours as a spy in Team Fortress 2. He knows the class like the back of his hand because he's spent so much time in it. And while the uploader thanked the commenter for complimenting him in such a way, he said that Stabby was on a whole nother level, and his justification for that was a little wobbly, but having watched Stabby's gameplay and having played with Stabby myself, and then watching the gameplay of this YouTuber, I could see a very, very distinct disparity between Stabby's gameplay, and I would call him a professional spy, by all means, and then this other player's gameplay. And it was really eye-opening to see this pub spy and compare him to a competitive spy. Granted, Stabby plays Highlander, and in standard competitive TF2 there are 2 soldiers, 2 scouts, a medic, and a demo, depending on class restrictions. Spy is what's called an off class, in that it's situational. It's not something that's going to be used all of the time, and it's used only to get really important picks, like a medic or a crits demo, or a crits demo and medic combination. But I know Stabby's skill set, and I've seen it in videos, and I've seen it in game. And I know that he has this, more than just his Twitch skills, more than just his movement, he has the mindset of the enemy player in mind every time he's engaging. He also knows when to use the pistol, when to use the ambassador, when to use the dead ringer, the invisibility watch, and even the cloak and dagger I've seen him use a couple times. But watching this other player, this pub spy, it was interesting to see where Stabby would have done something and that I would have agreed with, and where this pub player did something. And in a game like Battlefield or Call of Duty, where the skill gap is much more compressed than it is in TF2, because for me TF2 has almost no skill ceiling. There's always more you can learn to do because there's so much to do in that game. But in Battlefield or Call of Duty or Crysis or any other standard competitive shooter where the skill gap is not huge, but big enough to have a disparity between the large and the small, I still think there's a lot you can learn from watching the highest level players and comparing them to lower level players and see where their decisions fail. If I watch, for example, an Excalibur's video, it's not so much that his aim is good, which it is. Aim is important. But it's his decision making and his split-second decision making that really win him the day most times. Now, a lot of this comes down to map knowledge and game knowledge, but I've seen a lot of highly ranked players who I can assume have at least played one other COD who have no map knowledge, do not navigate intelligently, and if they're navigating at all, they're running straight towards you in a sprint. And you won't see the players of the highest level doing that, especially at the MLG level, as much hate as that particular group gets. I think there's still a lot to be learned from watching them and then watching another group of pub stompers. Because pub stompers play in a very wild and chaotic manner. There's not a lot of thought that goes into how they succeed, because in pub Call of Duty, you can spray from the hip with an LMG from across the map. You'll probably get at least a UAV if you know what you're doing, sort of. When you're watching players of the highest level play against players of the highest level, it comes down to who can outthink who. It's not the shot that matters. It's not the map knowledge that matters, because you have to assume as a high-level player that your other competitors know just as much and maybe even more than you do yourself. And so it's a matter of, alright, based on the situation I'm in, what do they know and what do I know, and how can I use both of those factors to my advantage? And much in the way that Stabby uses enemies' minds against them, competitive players of all levels have to use their minds more than their trigger fingers. Yes, fast reflexes are important, Yes, mouse control is important, and aim is important, and map knowledge is important, where you can jump, where you can strafe to, where you can get to, where you wouldn't be thought to get to fast enough. But ultimately, and this is the important thing, competitive gaming is all about the mindset. And that's why I think you see the highest level competitive shooters, Counter-Strike, Pro Mod, competitive Call of Duty, competitive Battlefield, they all have really limited player counts, limited spawns, limited respawn timers if there are any, and the selection of weapons that are used is really quite small. Because the administrators of the tournaments or the competitions want to make sure that everything comes down not to guns, not to hip fire, not to map knowledge, but player skill. And in Search and Destroy, when you only have one life, and you know there are 3 players on the enemy team, and 1 player on your team, you're the last guy alive, you have to outthink them. You have to say, alright, based on where I am, and where the last sound I heard was, what is the best route that I can take? And in a game like Team Fortress 2, where Spy is all about mind games, you really want to know how every class works on the map you're playing at. In Call of Duty competitive Search and Destroy, let's go with Pro Mod for example, sound and sight are some of the most important things, but they are the means to the end of your decision making. If you come to a crossroads in a competitive match, in a Search and Destroy match for example, and you know that there's at least 2 players in the enemy team, and you've just seen one of them in one location, it is your job as that player to say, alright, I know what one of them is. Do I assume that they're together, or that they're smart and that they're far apart, watching my objective from a certain location? And these mind games are one of the reasons I think most Call of Duty players, most casual shooter players, don't like the harder core shooters, because Call of Duty, for me, and I've said this before, is a game where you can turn your brain off. The target finder is a turn brain off scope. It tells you where your enemy is, how big their target is, and does some of the aiming for you. But a game like Quake or Red Orchestra 2, where you really have to advance slowly, you have to think smart, you have to play smart, you have to play quick, but you have to play intelligently, a lot of the players they bring in don't like it because it's not Call of Duty. Now what exactly does that mean? Well, it means, in essence, that it's not easy, that it's not thoughtless, that it's not something you can simply pick up and be at least marginally successful with. And if you go back and watch the free-to-players, back when Team Fortress 2 first went free-to-play, they were using their Call of Duty and more standard shooter knowledge to inform a completely separate game. And it was funny for a lot of the old-school TF2 players like myself to watch these people playing sniper thinking they could shoot through windows. And you would think that that's a pretty obvious thing to happen, but in Team Fortress 2 that's not how it works. And you see people trying to play Spy for the first time and comparing it to your own experiences, and you think, well, it's not that impressive just to watch them because they don't know what they're doing. And if I can bring it back to the beginning, watching this pub player, who I'm not going to mention, and comparing him to Stabby's gameplay, it was eye-opening for me because the decisions he was making were sloppy. He was moving incorrectly. He wasn't doing the right kind of trick stab for the moment. He was using the wrong gun. He was using the wrong kind of cover, the wrong kind of class for his disguise. But the kicker of it is, first of all, he's not Stabby. No one can have 4,000 hours as Spy in the span of 2 days. But more importantly, he had yet to have a full grasp of where he should be and what he should be using at any one period. And that just comes with experience. And experience can give you the ability to play mind games with your opponents. And it's through that, and almost that alone, you can truly be a top-tier player.